Our next speaker is Ronald Skip Cole, who I started to introduce before. He's the program officer here at USIP's Education and Training Center.
The academy here, we teach a lot of courses in peacebuilding. Actually, there's a simulation going right now across the hall, so we do a lot of role-play simulations. We're trying to cross the chasm and move more technology into those simulations. And we've created a tool for our own use, but it's also a tool for you to use. Okay, so we are trying to cross the chasm. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to discuss why, what, and spend some time on how, and finish up on what next. And then while I still have your attention before the conclusions, I'll acknowledge some of the wonderful people who've helped in this. We've been blessed by many, many people. This is quite an event here today. Joel and actually this whole meeting was going to be me and 5 geeks, and then Joel and Sheldon got involved, and now look what they've done. So this meeting, I think, represents the explosion of things going on in this universe. It is like a universe exploding, and we've been on the cusp of bringing more simulation training into our lives. I think now we're finally going to push across and actually do it. If you go to the next slide. Actually, do I have a clicker? I'll just keep saying slide. You've heard lots of reasons why we're doing these simulations. I want to take a step back and reiterate just a few. A complex world requires complex tools. I mean, this is not our grandfather's peace-building operation, right? The slide on your left, the representation of the flag raising at Iwo Jima and the flag raising in Iraq, all very brave men, Marines and a Navy corpsman on the left, 2 Marines on the right. I was in the Navy, which is kind of like being in the military too, so I can identify. But we live in a world of much more complexity and nuance. And these lessons have to permeate deeply down our institutions as to what's right and what's wrong. It's called the strategic corporal, but if one guy making a mistake that gets caught on film for CNN can set back your cause, your battle for ideas terribly, well, you've got to make sure that all guys know not to do that one particular act. And the bar is extremely high today. We live in a world where our society demands that we do these operations without tremendous loss of life or treasure. So we've got to actually spot the problems long before they manifest themselves. There's a great Chinese doctor story that I don't have time to go into today. Look for it soon on our blog. But the thrust of that story is that the best doctors are the doctors who can spot a disease before the patient has manifested terrible symptoms, right? You've got to be there before. And I'll give you a quick example of that. Imagine a group of do-gooders, people with the best possible intentions, go into a village and they dig a well. They ask the geologist, saw the geologist where to dig the well. They dig the well where he says, and lo and behold, they've irritated the tribal chief because he was making money off of the previous water distribution and he liked that. Now there's antagonism between him and them. So things escalate, finally someone gets killed, more people have to go into that village, fuel to the fire. Terrible situation. Could have all been stopped had they just dug the well in the right spot. Had they known to be respectful to that one particular person, known to drink those cups of tea, we would never have had all those issues down the line. So we're trying to stop problems at that point and teach people how to do that. Next slide, please. This is ancient Chinese wisdom, right? You put people in a position where they actually are going through the motions, they will learn things at a deeper level. And that's the type of level we want to reach. Matt Caffrey, a military historian, calls it virtual experience. We want to help people develop virtual experience so they can make their mistakes in that virtual world where it's safe. If you have a leader make a mistake in the real world and his career depends upon what he's done, he will defend what he has done to his dying day, right? And these situations are never very clear, so it gets very murky. You want to allow people to be in a place where they can make their mistakes. So next slide, please. Now I mentioned we created a tool for our use, but it's also for you. And when I say that, I really mean it is for you. It is an open source tool, and it will allow anyone to quickly create and conduct online training scenarios. And a lot of good pedagogy has gone into it. It's a tool by educators for educators. But very quickly, you can download the code off of Google's site today, and you can be up and running creating online training simulations. They're not high fidelity simulations. They're more like icons. If you saw what you liked icons, you saw something like that, but you said, you know what, I want a quick icon simulation. I have an idea, I plan that out. Then for $25 a month, enough to host the software that you download on a server, you can be up and running. And the more people who use it, the stronger the tool will grow. Now I put the definition below of open source. It's a deep topic, but in general it just signifies that it can be used by anybody and it's open to inspection. And I put down there some examples. I think you're all familiar with Wikipedia. Linux, some of you may not be familiar with that. It's an operating system like Windows that one fellow wrote some code, other people liked it, and now millions and millions of man-hours have gone into developing that piece of code, Linux. And I will assure you that that Linux project, that Linux operating system, even if you've never used it, has improved your life. Linux makes Windows better. Linux is an alternative to Windows. So by creating that open source tool, they rose the bar on Windows. The Windows couldn't crash quite so often. People would get upset and just go to Linux. So this world of open source is one of the new phenomenons of our day, and we hope to create the crystal around which a truly phenomenal open source project can grow. The next slide, please. Now the first slide is what happens when any new technology gets introduced, right? This is very common. If you're old enough to remember $300 clunky LED calculators, you know, that now you couldn't give away, right? Any technology drops in price. The technology on simulation creation is dropping in price right now. We want to kind of drive it even quicker down to the fiducial layer, right, where anybody can afford to run good simulations. We want lots of good simulations run so that more of them get done, more talk goes about it, and we raise the conversation. While the technology is still very expensive, I think people frequently focus on the wrong issues, right? They spend time thinking about, well, this program's got this widget and we need that or whatever. When the technology is extremely cheap, then we'll be able to refocus on the more essential issues, which are what are we trying to teach, how are we trying to teach it. Can they hear me okay online? I know that's been an issue. All right, thanks. Next slide, please. All right, so this thing that I've been talking about, this OpenSim platform, what's it look like? Well, it's a web application, so it runs in a browser, but it looks like whatever the simulation author creates. I'm going to go around the circle here. I don't know if they can see the red dot online, but I'm going to go around the circle from authors to instructors, students, and bring it on around. It's a web application, so it's extremely accessible. To the authors, this tool is a wizened guide to guide them through the process of creating a meaningful training simulation. Right? It makes them focus on what their objectives are, what they're trying to teach, who they're trying to teach it to, and it takes them down through a series of steps. Then it makes it easy for the instructors to get in to see a library and some controls to run the simulation. We want to make it painfully easy to use. I'm an educator myself. We educators have a huge number of tools in our bag of tricks, right? Lots of ways to teach things. If a simulation is hard to run, we're not going to do it. If it's expensive, we're not going to do it. So we're trying to lower that bar. They say amateurs talk strategy, pros talk logistics. We're worried about the logistics of these. We want lots of simulations run so that training can get out there to everybody. The students participate in these simulated worlds. They're not high-fidelity virtual worlds yet, but as John Wilkenfeld of Icons mentioned, there's actually some advantage to that. Also, the students live in a world where you're negotiating and sending memos back and forth to people. You want them to think through their strategies kind of quicker than they're going to have to play out in the real world. You don't want to have people spend 6 months in a virtual Kosovo to prepare them for a 6-month deployment in Kosovo. You want them to be able to kind of grasp learning moments quickly. Our tool works at all 3 of these levels right now. We still haven't reached to this level, the communities of interest, but that's our next point. When you have enough authors generating simulations, and it's being pushed out around any one topic, our topic is peacebuilding, you'll develop communities of interest that can then push back on the simulations. Next slide, please. So this is a brief slide to say what authors can do with the tool. Really, we're trying to just set up a conversation between the author, this fellow who has a message, fellows, 5 guys on a plane coming back from Iraq or whatever, that they want to teach. Maybe they want to teach If you get garbage collection up, your number of deaths due to explosive devices go down. Whatever they've learned that they feel a burning desire to teach, that they can go into this conversation with the computer and generate that online training simulation right away. Next slide, please. And I stole this from the tool. I mean, there's not a lot of screenshots here, but this is all the steps that a simulation author will have to go down through. I know you probably can't see that in the back. They're probably have to go through it many, many times to get it right. And it's a tough thing to do. But the two important points I want to make on that. First off, this creating simulations without programmers involved is a hard project. It's a DARPA hard project. We found out DARPA is doing the exact same thing. They're doing it because you want to separate any space between the people who have the lessons and the people who need to get the lessons. And if you're going to put the lessons in a training simulation, and it's going to take you 6 months and $3 million to build that training simulation, by the time you've got it built, you may no longer even need it. So they want to remove that impedance, right? So it's a DARPA hard project to create simulations. They're trying to tackle that with millions of dollars, taxpayer money. We're trying to eventually tackle that with millions of contributed hours of people who believe that they can use their coding skills to help further the causes of peace. The other aspect of this, the long and painful process of creating a simulation, I've worked with experts from many walks of life. Myself, every time I try to cast my thoughts into a solid medium, I find the same thing. I didn't understand things as well as I thought I did, right? The more people that we push through the system, the more simulation creators that we create, the more people who will have those revelations, right? And it will raise their own awareness and it will raise the conversation. That's when I say this is a tool for you. I want everybody to be a simulation author eventually, because the process of creating these simulations is such a very powerful learning experience. I've met modelers from many companies who tell me that, lots of money get paid to create this model, and at the end of the day what they really have? They have modelers who understand the situation. We want to help bring that enlightenment to more people. Next slide, please. So instructors can look at a library of simulations, they can review the various simulations, and they can go down the line, click, 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 bang, they got a game, right? That's the exact goal. Click, 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 bang, they got a game, their students are involved. Next slide, please. The players can go into that simulated world, they can search for the information that they're going to need, they can interact electronically or face-to-face, everything gets recorded. They can record, they can plan their strategies, they can respond to real live events, we call them injects. Things are going along fine in your simulated world, then a bus blows up and both sides blame each other, however you want to do it. So these are all the things that can happen to the player. At the end, they can reflect on their progress and figure out what they would have tried differently. And here again, nobody dies, right? Sometimes people are embarrassed. That's as bad as it gets. Next slide, please. The communities of interest experience, the community of interest, their experience, what we're trying to do is get kind of cradle to grave to rebirth information flow. Now, I heard Colin mention the wisdom of crowds just recently. We kind of want to tap in that also. Also, you heard Steve York and Yvonne Marovich talk earlier about the communities they want to grow around their simulations, which I applaud them completely. It's excellent work. I'm honored to be in the same community as they are working on these issues. The same thing, the cradle of information is the real world, but you got to package that so that you can give those learning experiences to people. And then, if it's in a simulation that was created in 1991, well, maybe it's not all that relevant today. That's what I call the grave. But the rebirth is the pushback from your players. Next slide, please. We've run this for one course here, and we had phenomenal success. And a lot of that has to go, the credit has to go to the people who wrote that simulation. Andy Bloom and Lauren Van Meter of our institution wrote that. But these instructors use words like epiphany, self-confessional, potentially life-altering. You get someone to a point in the simulation where he realizes, wait, maybe I'm not the great communicator I thought I was. You take that person now 10 years later when he's making real decisions and people could die if he makes a stupid decision. What's the value of better decision making? It's hard to put a value on it. But we had great results with the one that we have run, and the bottom line is we're going to be putting 15 more into the system next year. Next slide, please. Now this is my stair step to the holodeck. Who says government employees can't dream? The layer we're at right now, the baseline, are the tabletop exercises, like the simulation that USIP is running next door. It's also called a bog sat for a bunch of guys and gals sitting around a table talking, right? And those are great events, but a lot of the quality of that simulation depends on the quality of those people sitting around that table. A lot of human capital. What we've actually done, the next stair step, is web-enabled them, distributed exercises. Now we get things that are more repeatable, recordable. Everything gets recorded inside the system, so now we can see how things played out, play it back again. And we can incorporate multimedia. It's one thing to hear that there's a bus blown up. It's another thing to see a CNN report showing blood and stuff. So we can add that level by just raising up to that level. The next level, I'm glad to see Jack from TRADOC here because I've talked to him about OPM. We want to use other people's models, not other people's money, other people's models. These things we're still figuring out. We're still figuring out developmental economics, right? The more eyes you get on a particular model, the more people who can say, no, that's right, or that's wrong, or that won't work here in Turkey, or et cetera, wherever. So we want to be able to incorporate other people's models. Fortunately, we have someone on the team who helped develop the high-level architecture for the military, for their kinetic simulations. So someone's going to develop an architecture to allow these to plug in. If not, we'll have to find a way to do it. But we want to be able to plug into other people's models. And then finally, at the highest level, the AI characters. When you've added models and agents, now you're at what the modeling and sim world say is a hybrid model, and it's generally recognized as the way to go. And 20, 30, whatever, that is a holodeck. But it's not just any holodeck. It's a holodeck where you got the wisdom of great simulation authors and thought leaders like Peter Perla and Eric Conrad. They're in the system with you, right? Because their wisdom has been poured into that system to help you create something that's meaningful. Next slide, please. All right. Like I said at the beginning, this project has been blessed by many hands. The top line, kind of the inner team, Mike Lekson's the best project champion a man could ask for. Rick Cunningham, Alan Gunn, and Julia provided much of the vision for this project. And Lauren Van Meter was the intrepid instructor who took this simulation into a real-life class to make it real. And all these other people have provided blood, sweat, and tears, or just extremely generous with their ideas. And then open source coders everywhere, because we're already leveraging other people's code right now. Google is making a product. If you go wave.google.com, you'll see what they're working on. See what they're working on and think, wow, what if you could plug that into an online simulation right now? And that'll be our reality in the next couple of years. And the people at Google working on it are the same people who brought you Google Maps. So I believe that they'll probably deliver on what they're trying to do. Next slide, please. So the conclusions, the future keeps slipping into our lives, right? I mean, it doesn't come, we don't have our rocket cars, but we do have our Wiis and Google Maps and Gapminder. If you don't know what Gapminder is, Google that right away. Twitter and iPhone, and shift happens, right? The future keeps coming, so it's not unreasonable to anticipate wonderful things. And this really is, an idea whose time has come. And user-generated content has been a powerful driving force in many areas. If you could go just back a few years, you say to somebody, I'm going to create a site where anybody is going to be able to upload a film, and someone says to you, well, who's going to use it? How are you going to make money off it? Why don't you take your money and just invest it in Bernie Madoff? Forget that idea, right? My background is physics, so I think in driving forces. Once these things sort of took off, there was so much driving force for them to come to completion. If Jimmy Wales hadn't done Wikipedia, somebody else would, right? Someone's going to enable us. Someone's going to enable everybody to be able to create sims, right, easily for training. Might as well be us. As I mentioned, this universe is just expanding. It's just starting, I believe. It's been building for a long time, but getting simulations into our lives and training experiences is really going to blow up. And if the organization that helps cross that chasm, bring that into people's daily lives, is also an organization that is dedicated to peace, I think that'll have reverberations down the line for many decades to come. If you're interested and want to find out more, please send me an email. I'll take questions now.
Thank you so much. You gave a good overview how the smart tools are going to get smarter in the future. Let's just have two quick questions here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I wanted to get this question off my chest for a very long time. And it's about, we discussed simulation all day. Some of it looked like experiments, role-playing simulations, and training and stuff. One thing that we haven't talked about is, for agency like yours, USIP, and for donors and others, you would want a simulation, I would think, that is that informs policymakers, that formulates your policies, for policy formulation, for designing policy, for intervention, whatever it is that you want. To do that, can you use your model or any other model? How would you do it? What data you would need? Could you talk about that?
Well, I'm not the most qualified here to talk about that, but I mean, these simulations, war games have been done quite a while. I think what you're talking about is sort of a political military war game that people try to use to determine what the right, well, they're not always in a military context. You know, sometimes the best solution is to not fight. But those sorts of simulations have been used for a long time. The history of wargaming is extensive. Actually, sitting in the front row, Peter Perla wrote The Art of Wargaming. So I think, and Matt Caffrey's talked about that people have been wargaming probably since humans have been moving sticks around, rock drills. In a sense, we're peace gaming, and that's a little bit different. What's that?
May I elaborate my question?
Sure.
What I want to say, I'll be very brief. Yeah. You design a policy, you'll see if it works, for example, in Darfur, or it doesn't work. So you have a hypothesis, you test your hypothesis. It may not work, it may work. It may work today, it may not work. You were talking about a model that's built in 1990s, may not work today. So is that your model works in that, or anyone who talked about their models?
Well, these models.
All I've seen is just training.
Yeah.
So do you test policy?
Is Colonel Evans still here? Right here. Do you want to answer that, Colonel Evans?
I just walked in. So
oh, okay.
Well, no, don't get distracted.
The question is, you talked about scenarios.
Yeah.
And you said you want to make a general like General Mullen or portrays. But they're as good as the strategies they make or the tactics they choose to do.
Right.
The top thing is the policy. So to formulate a policy, do you test different policies for the same scenario?
For decision.
For decision makers.
Yeah, we do.
In other words, do you test hypotheses?
What we do, and what I say, remember, you know, in our case, you know, part of what we're teaching the War College student and reinforcing in this particular exercise is not precisely what to think, but how to think. So this is kind of a decision-making enabler, if you will, in the macro sense. Does that help?
We can talk later.
Okay.
All right, we have one final question. Noveck?
Actually, a number of people were asking this. What kind of skills does it take to build a scenario in a system like this? How do we all start to do this?
Probably the first thing I'd say is just to drive, right? I mean, you have something you really want to teach, whatever that is, and this is for peace building, but it could be for better canvassing, better salesmanship, whatever you want to teach, somewhere where humans interact. You're going to have to determine who the important actors are, you know, what types of events can occur to them. So when strategic thinking helps, but I'd say more than anything else, I'd say drive. You get something out there. It doesn't have to be perfect, and then let other people beat on it, and then make the second generation. I mean, part of this is just being able to, the tenacity to put your stuff out there, let other people beat on it, survive, and make it stronger. So tenacity, I'd say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.